Hi, everyone. Hi. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I think that we'll probably have some more people trickle in, but we thought we'd get started. We are live streaming as well, so for those that are watching, welcome as well. I'm really thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event. It's our very first public event or event for the art program at Michigan Central, so it's a big milestone for us. Yeah. We've been really waiting to have this type of event, and it's just the best occasion, which is to celebrate and announce our 6th inaugural Artists in Residence, the Michigan Central and Newlab Art and Technology Residence, which you'll learn more about in just a bit. I'm Kelly Kivland. I'm the director and lead curator of the art program. I started or assumed my role at the end of January alongside Lauren Ruffin, who is the director and lead strategist. I don't see her in the room yet, but I know she's on her way. And we're really thrilled to be a part of this wonderful community and to realize what was very much possible, not only here at the station and this greater site, but really in conversation and in dialogue with all of you. So we really are very thankful that you've joined us tonight. As most of you know, the program is dedicated to exploring the intersection of art, society, and technology. And really, those are the core principles that are guiding us as we explore what is possible, not only through different forms of art, but also dialogue, initiatives, and greater programs that we really hope to explore in partnership not only with Detroit organizations, but also in the region, nationally and internationally, and really thinking about what that conversation or intersection brings to this, not only ourselves, but to the greater nation and our field. We really endeavor to establish Michigan Central as a destination that's at the forefront of not only location specific, but looking at the different ways in which we engage, explore, and question technology in our lives. So over the next couple of years, you're gonna see various types of programs that we'll be piloting, not only the Artist in Residence program, but commissions, performances, AR and VR projects, a host of different things that will allow us to really engage with that very conversation and support new work. And it will all be within a greater sort of conversation, like I said, within our community. So always looking at it through a social and political lens, as well as real urgencies that we're facing, not only here in Detroit, but also in the region and even beyond that. I'm particularly excited also to highlight another milestone. So in addition to the Artist in Residence program, for those that haven't been in the station yet, we were able to realize a major commission for the opening by Suchi Reddy. It's titled Me Plus You, and it's an AR and machine learning light sculpture that asks your own version of the future. And it responds to you in different color theories, both Western and Eastern. So if you haven't yet been able to engage with that work, we welcome you back every Friday evening and Saturday through, I think, the end of August. You'll be able to take a tour and explore that work. Suchi, for those that you don't know, or for those that don't know her, she actually received her architecture degree here at UD Mercy. So it's a real wonderful honor to be able to invite her and commission this work for the inaugural opening. We're also deeply grateful for the support of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Truly, without this generous funding, which has been instrumental not only in the Artist in Residence program, but in the inauguration of the art program in general at Michigan Central. It really has allowed us to dream big and have a reality that is what we all have been really dreaming about, I think, even since I've started. And John and Cézanne, I want to also point out two, who have been instrumental in the framework and the visioning of what this program can be well before I and Lauren started. And it was through their, I'd say, genius that has really allowed me to step into my role, but also were allowing us to sort of dream within this Knight Foundation grant. So thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey. We really look forward to exploring, creating, and growing together. And I now welcome and invite to the stage Nate Wallace, Michigan Central Head of Civic Partnership, David Belt, co-founder of Newlab, for a conversation that's moderated by Catherine Kelly, who is Head of Communications and Editorial. So thank you.
That is a strange step. I thought it was one more.
Good evening, everyone. I think I'll just jump right in.
Need some help?
Yes, please. Thank you. So most businesses and large institutions, if they decide to invest in art, it is more of a commission-oriented program. Why did you both decide to do something different?
Good start. So real quick before we get started, I just want to highlight Kelly Kivland and Lauren Ruffin. I know Lauren's not here yet, but it was an extensive search for Kelly Kivland, for our two art directors. It was over 180 applications that was narrowed down to 50, to 20, to 10, and exhaustive process in regards to find exactly what we needed at Michigan Central. So I just want to give a warm welcome to Kelly Kivland. So I think that when we think about the ecosystem that Michigan Central wants to build, it was really important, number one, that we partnered with Newlab, who was going to bring the best and brightest minds to the station, right? So with regards to mobility, with regards to climate, with regards to sustainability, we knew what they were going to do, right? So it was really important for us to think about, how do we create this magic? How do we really start to think about the type of ecosystem that value criticality in a way that was important? So we really just started to break down innovation and what that meant for us, right? So when we think about innovation, we start to think about artists. We started to think about our architects. We started to think about leaders in sustainability. We started to think about academics and designers and all these different disciplines that we needed to have here in order to create this magic. We wanted to have them in community, talking to one another. So we wanted to go deep, and we didn't want to go wide, right? So it was really important for us to think about the conversations that needed to come out of here. So when we're talking about advanced aerial mobility, what does it look like to have that conversation with an artist who's thinking about how drone technology is used in society? So we want to have those conversations. We want to have that criticality here. We want to partner with those people that's thinking about this type of innovation. We want to partner with those people that's thinking about that type of work and how technology affects society. So it was really important for us to think about an ecosystem that existed just beyond tech for tech's sake or art for art's sake. We wanted everybody to be in conversation with one another.
Yeah, exactly. From my perspective, so this is our second kind of major headquarters of Newlab, and we work with entrepreneurs who, in particular, are working on decarbonization, and in Detroit, mostly around mobility and logistics. And the thing about entrepreneurs is they're very single-minded, right? Because every day is an existential day. Every day they could fail. Every day they could run out of money. Every day they could actually realize their thing doesn't work. And that singleness of purpose is kind of beautiful because it makes them iterate in a way that's like, their pants are on fire.
Yeah.
But it's also very myopic. And I started Newlab because I wanted to ask tough questions about technology, and I wanted Newlab to be an anecdote to Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley, everybody thinks they're right, they pull into their garage, they're dictating for the whole world now the way that data and society interact, the way that technology affects a community. And New York City is very different than Silicon Valley, and Detroit's very different than Silicon Valley. So how do we make sure that we get away just from this blind techno-optimism and think about technology a lot differently? And that's why an artist in residency program is so important here. 6 years, 7 years ago, people thought of Uber as the sharing economy. Uber is not the sharing economy. Uber is like electronic indentured servitude, for drivers, right? It's gamified the way to get people to be more productive in a way. And artists traditionally ask that question. And there's similarities between artists and entrepreneurs, right? And like, people think of like tech entrepreneurs like they're overnight successes. Everything's like an 8-year overnight success. Like everything takes forever in ways that people don't see. And both in art and in entrepreneurship, it really requires relentless incrementalism. It's relentless incrementalism that makes something good. And artists understand that process, and they understand how to push, and they understand how to demand things from technology and from materials that aren't necessarily ordinary. And that helps the entrepreneurs think differently and also kind of get their heads out of their shells. So that's a long answer, but I'm thrilled. I can't believe that we got here and that we have the first inaugural group. I also want to shout out to Cézanne and John and to Nate for pulling this together. This is just wonderful.
So we have this growing ecosystem, artists, entrepreneurs, engineers, a lot of different people working together. What does it mean to foster an environment where innovation can thrive? And and tell me more about what art means in an innovative environment.
I mean, I'll go first. So when most places that have the tools and resources and community that Newlab has are like schools or corporations that end up owning the intellectual property, right? So like the sacred customer is like the creativity and the ability for people to kind of make their own way that they can do here that they can't do if they're developing at a university or developing in a big company. And so part of the conditions are just being able to create a platform that allows people to have the kind of dignity and the tools and resources that they would have someplace else that would be extractive. And the goal would be that for the artists as well, to give them access to the kind of technology and also the entrepreneurial thinking and the technologists who can help expand their practice. And then hopefully for Michigan Central, that helps foster different types of thinking and different types of growth from a community perspective, and also from like as an example that's positive for Detroit. I mean, that's how I think of it.
Yeah, I really think about Red Bull House of Art in 2012. It was just an interesting time in Detroit for that to kind of pop up. And I just think about the small amount of space that they have. They had maybe 2,000, 3,000 square feet of space. They had a couple artist studios, and they did a little bit of fabrication. And the amount and quality of work that they was able to produce in that small amount of space was amazing. You had Ash Arter, you had Tiff Massey, you had Sidney James, you had Tylon Sawyer, you had Rashawn Rucker. You had all these individuals who used that space as a way to elevate their practice. And now we fast forward to today in Michigan Central, 33 acres, anchored by a 650,000 square foot renovated train station with $15 billion of equipment in it that ranges from CNC machines, fabrication machines, robotics, 3D printers, you name it, is here, right? And to be able to allow artists to come into this space and use this $15 million of machinery along with the campus, along with everything that we're kind of planning in relationship and community with the technologists and architects and designers, I think that it's extraordinary. And it doesn't exist anywhere else but here.
Yeah, if you could talk more about, I think, the opportunity that the space provides here. I mean, the campus, the 30 acres, you've talked a little bit about large-scale projects. As you've thought about art strategy at Michigan Central and at Newlab at Michigan Central, what excites you about the amount of space we have to work with?
Yeah, I think that it's a tremendous opportunity to have, it's a tremendous opportunity to have the opportunity to create a cultural institution. And like that doesn't happen anymore, right? And Detroit is in the conversation in a different way. So, you know, in just the past couple years, I've been able to travel a little bit from Montreal to New York to London and a couple other places. And when you're talking about adaptive reuse, when you're talking about the work that's coming out of Detroit, we're part of the global conversation. So the opportunity to actually have this residency in regards to just not art for art's sake, but how art is used in technology, and then you connect it to a global conversation. I think the opportunity is limitless, right? I think there's a bigger conversation that we're a part of, and the fact that artists are invited into this larger conversation about technology, about artificial intelligence, you know, I think it just connects to a much larger conversation that we need to have globally. So I also think it positions Detroit very differently in the ecosystem, right? So it's important for us in the arts program to not just have Detroit talking to Detroit. It's really important for us, and I'll say this, it was a time where that was very important for us to kind of be insular and to just kind of love one another and just kind of lift each other up. You know, but now I think Detroit has always had something to say. It's always been a global city, but I think that we have the opportunity to connect it to a global conversation.
David, you're really involved in art in New York. What does it mean to do this work in Detroit?
Well, you know, so I'm involved in some arts institutions in New York, it's true. And I don't know how else to say it except for that, you know, I was very involved in the design and build out of this space. So I was coming here for the last couple of years, at least once a month, sometimes twice a month for a few days, because I was very involved and I wanted to be. And I really fell in love with Detroit. And Detroit has a lot of characteristics that you can't find in New York that I find, you know, really inspiring. I mean, there's so many things happening here so on purpose and in different nooks and crannies in the neighborhoods, and it's like you have to discover it. And also what I loved kind of when I first got here, I met a lot of people and I've actually made quite a few friends here, and I love to hang out here. But the attitude was sort of like this. It was like, oh, it's so great. You know, you're coming from New York and you're doing this thing here. And at the same time, Steve McGee knows, they were like, what the hell do you know? You're from New York. You know, like, what are you doing here? Like, you know, like the first conversation we had, I was a human sacrifice in front of the arts committee. Cézanne was on, a few of you guys were on. And you know, I got beaten up, and you know, it was all right because like I liked that people were saying, you're from New York, you're coming here, what are you going to do? That was one thing. The second thing was, people didn't really believe we were going to do it until it opened, I think. And, you know, I kind of like the Detroit attitude of, show me, you know, show me, you know, sure, show me, you know. And so I'm just so, again, just like really full of gratitude that this is the first cohort of the Arts and Residency program. It's funny, there was a picture of some of the shop equipment that we took at the opening. It was still on pallets, you know? So it's like a little, like I see it, you know, like that stuff wasn't working, you know, like it was on pallets. And now the shop is like, you know, up and running, and you know, and this first cohort are really acting as sort of like a, you know, a beta group of folks. But to you know, to test out what it means to have a shared resource between entrepreneurs and artists, and you know, at this scale. But I guess like the point is that Detroit's full of opportunity, and there's opportunity to fail here. And I'm not saying that like I think failure is a little bit overrated actually, but I think that like the idea that you can be in a place and you can try something and the stakes are, and things are not so expensive, and you can have a studio and you can find materials, it really creates, you know, a much more fertile ground for interesting things to happen than what's happening in New York right now. I mean, still there's cool stuff in New York, don't get me wrong, but I'm just really like the Detroit spirit is really great.
And finally, Both of you love art. You've brought art into the center of your careers. What have you learned from art and artists?
This might sound super cynical, and I'm also looking at this terrible picture.
I think you look good.
Thank you. I think that the thing that just the spirit of artists has just kind of brought me is the fact that there is no original thought. You know, everything that you think you know has been thought of in a different way. You can't really put your stake on the ground in regards to knowledge, because the question of why will always continue to haunt you, right? And somebody was thinking about your why way before you thought about why. So that has really been just kind of staple in my life, is just kind of understanding that we know very little about all this, but the opportunity to just ask the questions and really just become a knowledge seeker has been really important, just personally and professionally.
Yeah, for me, I mean, art's the only, I mean, art as like a concept is the only thing that pushes back on established truths in a way that can challenge them repeatedly, and without the kind of same boundaries of rules that relate to typical conversation. So, you know, I'm involved in this other organization that is, you know, this is like art and technology, but the other group is like art and science. And what I think is cool is, like, we're not trying to make artists into entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs into artists, but like the collision of the 2 points of view, I think it's our job to create more of. So this is just this is the first cohort, but, like, you know, what I would like to see is for the artists who need different things, you know, whether it be sensors or drone technology or anything, to like kind of force pairings between the entrepreneurs, and also for the artists to kind of critique the products in a way that they're used to critiquing art and other projects. Because the entrepreneurs don't get that, right? They get a yes or a no from a venture capitalist, but they don't get, that's ugly, you know? Like, they don't get, like, you know, like this thing doesn't actually, the human form that you're trying to create is not real, you know? And so pushing on, like, what does it mean to have data for social good? What does it mean for some natural solutions rather than just technological solutions that might be better? Those things have to come from questioning that comes from art. Those things will not come from industry, they will not come from venture capital, they will not come from other entrepreneurs, they will not come from the partners of entrepreneurs. So on the best day, it comes from that kind of collision. And I think that, you know, as this program continues, it's like, how do we create those collisions in an intentional way that's mutually beneficial to, you know, not only the artists, not only the entrepreneurs, but also to Michigan Central in general and to Detroit. That's the big goal. Yeah. And without art, it's just an echo chamber. Tech is an echo chamber. So. Yeah.
Okay, well, without further ado, I know Cézanne and John have more news for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cézanne Charles.
And I'm John Marshall. And as Route 2, we've been working together since 1998. And we've been critically exploring how technology can either enable or harm society. And so we were really excited when David Bell, for the first time, said, hey, let's do an arts and residence program at Michigan Central.
And so for us, it was really this opportunity to consider what could that be and what could that do for artists based in Detroit. It was really important for us to both benchmark and explore that across our national and international peers, but I would be lying if I said that the most important thing to us was really that it was in Detroit. that we got to do this here, that we got to consider this as part of an ecosystem that would continue to be vital and growing and strong, and at the core of it would be artists inside of this community. And I think that was the thing that we really chose to explore when we were developing the residency program.
So the bottom line is that each of these artists received $30,000 in 6 months with access to a shared studio here and all the fabrication facilities at Newlab.
Yeah, and critically for us, it's also that they get to form and forge a community together, that they're part of this greater exploration, and also that this was a nomination process from the get-go to really think about who could help us define and push and explore the boundaries at the start of the program that would then continue to grow and emerge over time. And so, you know, we were really grateful to both the internal teams at Michigan Central and Newlab for coming together as part of the selection panel, but we also had a number of external panelists join us and share their expertise. And so that include designer Abir Ali, as well as artistic director of MoCA, Jovelyn Vargas, as well as head of 4D design at Cranbrook Academy of Art, Carla Diana, as well as executive director Roddy Schock from I-Beam, which is a national organization based in New York that has really been one of the OGs of the art and technology movement in this country. And so with that phenomenal group of talent in the room, we are so pleased to actually have gotten an amazing group of 6 artists.
So I'll introduce them, and please stand up and be acknowledged as I say your name. So Simon Anton. Ash Arda, Leith Campbell, Michael Candy, Christina Schufel, and Wes Taylor.
I also want to thank our colleagues at Michigan Central as well as Newlab for the Herculean effort it has taken to both build and develop the program, but also to begin to tell very rich stories of the work coming out of this. So very, very big thanks to our communications colleagues. And we're going to actually have a moment to actually hear from the artists in their own words. So without further ado, please play the video for our artist in residence. The Michigan Central and Newlab Art and Technology Residency Program is really unique, not just in Detroit, but also nationally and internationally, as a real opportunity to welcome artists to be part of an innovation community. Backing that promise up with the idea that they receive $30,000 as well as access to one-of-a-kind, unique facilities within Michigan Central and the Newlab campus. What's most important is the way they both form and forge community and are welcomed into this innovation campus as vital members of how we sort of see getting to the future together. Hi, my name is Cézanne Charles, and I'm a partner and founder at Root of Two.
My name's John Marshall, and I'm also a partner and founder at Root of Two. And we've been working with Michigan Central and Newlab on the Art and Technology Residency for 2024.
What motivated me to be part of the Newlab residency is the fact that it's a tremendous opportunity to work on a project that I care about and to be able to explore all the facilities that have incredible fabrication technology, and to be able to use those tools not just to deliver a product, but to actually learn how they work, how they function, and then to be able to create new things. It's really a dream residency because there's support, there's space for growth, and then there's also a lot of embeddedness within the community.
I have never had the time to really dive into parametric modeling and 3D modeling, and I mean, I've used it in my practice a lot before, but never been like to make components and parts and things that fit together. You know, I would just design furniture with it, and it would be just a sketch more than an actual working model. One of the big things I'm getting out of the residency is just a much stronger grip on the modeling technology and on the more digital side of creation.
There are really amazing artists in this program that the more that I overlap and engage with them, I'm learning from their practice, and I'm being inspired by them. And so, yeah, I think there's some long-term benefits from being able to work on what I'm working on in a concentrated way here, and then being able to think about how beyond this experience I could continue to build and evolve my projects while working with others on theirs.
I've had a lot of residencies where I'm asked to move to a different town or a state and live there for a little while and then make some work, and I love that. But I think it's something different when you're asked to think and experiment and make something when you live just down the street. This particular residency is meaningful because it allows me to think alongside the community members that I'm already spending time with outside of these residency halls, and then ask their opinion and show them various stages of my project in a way that feels organic and not sort of constrained to the same kind of timeline that might be in place if I were at a residency sort of out of town or in a different space.
I think having an opportunity like this on the map has the potential to influence other emerging artists in the city to push the boundaries of their own practices and redefine the role that their art can have here and anywhere. I also believe that technology can and should be used to make life easier and more interesting, and I think that having artists and designers in tech is a large part of how we get there.
I think the program is still in its primordial state, which is a really exciting time to be here, and I think the future is only promising more exciting outcomes. Experimental art actually has a long history of working with technology, from early photography to more modern experiments with bioart and hypothetical futures. But I think art as a catalyst for dynamic thinking with emerging anything, science or tech, is always an interesting way to approach diverse outcomes for these sort of new systems. I think, yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Inviting artists into a tech building like this, yeah.
My pleasure to now welcome our esteemed guest up to the stage as we begin to talk about why process was so important to how we were thinking about the Michigan Central Art and Technology program. So without further ado, I will invite Xinran, Hasan, Tadeo, and Yinka up to the stage, as well as Kelly Kivland, our director and lead curator of Michigan Central's Art and Technology program. So everybody knows I like a good panel, right? So I'm very excited that we're going to actually talk about why process was so critically important as we were really trying to get to grips with what an art program could be in a space that in and of itself is devoted to experimentation. They're really at its core is this idea that we have to figure out how to nurture and support process over product at times. And that's rare. That's rare in entrepreneurial communities. It's rare in arts communities, and it's especially rare when we actually consider backing up that pledge with one-of-a-kind support and resources. And so I'm really grateful to all of these folks who've joined us for the last couple of days. They've actually been meeting and talking with all of our artists in residence, getting to learn a bit more about their practice, sharing both their insights and knowledge, but also being informed and impacted themselves by the work that the heirs are already doing. They've been in residence since May, working tirelessly in this building as they get to sort of know both the processes and people. So we're grateful to sort of be here at this moment, announcing them, but also talking about why process is critically important to the arts. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you all to maybe introduce yourselves. I'll start with Kelly, and if you could sort of say a little bit more about where you come from, what your background is, and more importantly, how do you come into this conversation and process? We're joined by folks who are both artists and designers and curators and educators, so we're really raring to go.
Yeah. Thank you again. How do I come into this space? So I started in, I guess my first love, I always say, is dance. I was a dancer, and so I think it really learning about the body, our agency in spaces, and all that can come from the collaboration that I learned in dance was, I think, really formative to how I then began to consider what else could be possible. And it began, I think, David, you said it really wonderfully in terms of, I think this is probably all I am destined to do. I think I ask too many goddamn questions and was really curious. I remember being a young person and a teacher, I think it was in 3rd grade, I was like, she asked too many questions, oh shit. It still continues, and I think it's a perfect field to be asking questions in. As artists, as thinkers, as practitioners, curators, that's what we're doing, and it's what our role is. So I think the way in which all this rolls up into where I am today, and in terms of process and the importance of process, it's just an ongoing investigation. It's an exploration constantly, and if we don't and aren't questioning even the process itself, we're not doing the work. So it's exciting. We're able to consider our own place, not only in our own lives, but within the field, but also be able to see in real time its effect and impact on culture, which is, to me, there's nothing better. So
great. Xinran.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Xinran Yuan. I'm a curator, producer, and program strategist working at the intersection of art and emerging technology. First of all, I just want to say what a privilege for me to be here in the past 2 days, getting to know the movers and shakers of this incredibly ambitious program and witnessing the bold, sensitive, and vital practices of our cohort. And I've learned so much from you. Thank you for sharing your time, and I hope this is just the beginning of me championing and supporting your career. So I have been working in the New York-centric international art world for about a decade, and in recent years, working both inside tech companies and in museums on art and tech collaboration programs. I was at HTC Vive, where I helped realize the first in-museum large-scale VR exhibitions in museums such as Louvre, V&A, American Museum of Natural History, and Venice Biennale. And then at Facebook or Meta, where I oversaw the commissioning of art in our New York campuses, as well as working closely with the Reality Lab and AI research teams on kind of crafting these residency opportunities and artist commission opportunities. And in 2024, I was honored to produce and co-curate the recent edition of the 7-on-7 program at Rhizome of the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. It's a program that since 2010 has every year paired 7 leading artists with 7 visionary technologists to come together for short-term creative collaborations under one very simple assignment of making something new. And at the end of the intensive 48-hour collaboration, they present the outcome to a live audience inside the museum. So I've really been working with different sets of collaborators and stakeholders to bring artists and technologists together, and have been a translator in between different value systems. And I just wanted to share my North Star in thinking through our relationship with technology and how art comes in to play in this is from the great Canadian physicist Ursula Franklin, who in 1989 gave a Massey lecture titled "The Real World of Technology." I recommend you all to look for this lecture. But in this lecture, she talks about technology not as a set of gadgets, but as a practice, a system, and a mindset. And I feel like today we are in such increasingly technocratic moment in our society, and our labor is further divided, and we're often just like seeing fragments of the work that we're assigned to do. And artists are one of the very few people who are still overseeing ideas and bringing them to life every step of the way and making situational decisions. And this is the type of practice of technology that Ursula Franklin defines as holistic technology, as opposed to a prescriptive technology where one is not aware of how things got to them and will go on from their hands. So yeah, I just want to honor artist practice as something that deeply nourishes us as human beings and sets an example for alternative practices that are not out of reach for all of us. So I encourage all of you to get to know their work and their process.
Thank you so much. Hasan?
Thank you, Cézanne. Thank you so much for having me here. So I'm Hasan Elahi. I'm an artist, and I play multiple roles here. So my relationship here, I guess 30 years ago, I came to Detroit to come to graduate school at Cranbrook, where many of our artists and residents have also experienced this magical space there. We have such a long history in this city of this identity of creativity. And it's always existed. I mean, Detroit is a city of makers. It's a city of makers, a city of doers. And it's also a city of culture makers. This is, this is the only UNESCO designated city of design in America. This is the place that if you look at any bit of American history, cultural history that roots back, it all roots back to this city. So this is the city that taught me how to be an artist. And I was here for graduate school, and then I left town in mid-90s, kind of got into the academic circuit, moved around a lot of it. And then about shortly after 9/11, I got reported as a terrorist. Brown guy, Muslim, what else? So I spent 6 months of my life with the FBI just to find that I was not a terrorist. And you're talking about process. Yeah. So I started sending my FBI agent photographs of what I was doing, where I was, all sorts of details. I had people that were like, it's like, why would you want to tell everybody what you're doing? And this is crazy. And then now people look at it, 20 plus years later, and like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? This looks like my Instagram feed. So how we've seen the shift in culture and how the normalization of self-surveillance, the normalization of feeding this machine of intelligence. So that's my project in terms of looking at process and such. But this is a project that's been going on for multiple decades. It's actually having the privilege of looking at this work and looking back at it and how much the technology has shifted. I can actually, so over the years, I've probably shared well over 100,000 images with my FBI agent. And I can just look at an image and know, okay, that was 2008. This was 2015. Now, obviously, my vision had changed during that time, but also the tools I was using. I mean, when this tool was first created, it was just so clunky. It was literally digital duct tape. It was like this and that and that and that. I mean, it ran off of a Nokia 6600, what we used to call a smartphone back then. This damn thing was 3/4 of an inch. With those T9 things, we had to like type a whole bunch of things. I mean, can you imagine we used to text like that? And it just seems so ancient. And it actually wasn't that long ago. So this is the shift in the process and the technology and all that. Now, in my other life, I also work at a university. I'm the dean of the College of Fine Performing and Communication Arts. It's a rather cumbersome name. It is the college for arts and culture and media. at Wayne State University. And this is really important because this is also, as Wayne State, as a public, as a university of access and opportunity, this is the university for the city of Detroit and how we represent Detroit, how we reflect Detroit. So in my other life now is really looking at myself as an advocate for the arts, creating platforms, allowing other creatives. I think one of the things that we tend to forget very quickly is all artists are essentially entrepreneurs. And all artists are running small businesses, and sometimes not so small. So I think this idea that artists are incredibly resourceful. There's this horrible myth that artists are actually bad with money. They're not. Artists just don't manage enough of it. They're incredible money managers. I mean, the amount of resourcefulness that artists have to get to that level, to use this and that and that and that and that. So the level of innovation, the level of inventiveness, the level of creativity. The other thing that's also really interesting where artists can actually, in terms of looking at process, is the level of teamwork and collaboration that takes place in the arts. I mean, we can talk all we want about training in business, about teamwork. There's not a single workshop that can teach you the level of teamwork as playing in a band. If any of you that are playing in a band, you know how that works, the give and take, the listening, the call and response. So there's a lot of, so I really find myself now in these spaces, how do we cultivate further generations of artists to continue this rich creative legacy that we have and this rich cultural legacy that we have in this city.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. Always mic drop moments. And so I want to turn to you, Tadeo, as well.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Tadeo. I'm coming from the UK, although I am Spanish, as you might guess by my accent. I currently serve as director of Abandoned Normal Devices, and I'm joined here today with my colleague Yinka, our creative director, and together with the rest of our team in Manchester, we produce, perhaps we're best known for producing the UK's only nomadic site-responsive digital arts festival. The AND Festival is very much an exploration of the post-industrial rurality of the north of England and the contrast of this with digital world building. And we do this through immersive and digital commissions, outdoor installations, and also talent development schemes, residencies, and fellowships like the one here at Detroit, Michigan Central. A little bit about my background. I started my career as a sound artist. I moved to London to complete an MA in sound art, and I quickly realized that I enjoyed talking about my friends and my colleagues' work more than I enjoyed talking about mine. I felt that I was more interested into what they had to say and in supporting their vision. So I knew that I was going to be more in behind the scenes artist management, working as a creative producer and helping artists and organizations realize ideas and projects. Before joining Abandoned Normal Devices, I founded an artist development agency called Mutant Promise, which really operated as a booking agency, helping musicians diversify their financial model, helping them develop workshop opportunities and knowledge sharing opportunities. So creating new monetizable relationships with their audiences. And previously, I joined a meetup group in London called the Music Hackspace, which was a subgroup of the London Hackspace. It was at the time the UK's largest hackerspace by membership with 1,000 members and facilities that you can find in this building, but at a much different scale. And the Music Hackspace meetup and project was very much about lowering barriers to entry to music technology outside of the academic context. So it also had this focus of democratizing knowledge and doing this through artist practice, working with music DIY makers, bedroom composers. And through this project, I helped grow the organization into an established company. and also develop its first funding schemes, space. We did a 3-year residency at Somerset House Studios in London, and I mentioned Somerset House Studios because it's very interesting to see how these heritage buildings are being, how there's opportunity with these heritage sites to be converted into thriving maker spaces where there's this intersection of private sector, DIY makers, small SMEs, smaller companies, entrepreneurs, and also artists. And it is very important that artistic practice is in this DNA. And I think, well, we might talk more about this in the panel, but I think Michigan Central is sitting at this intersection for a number of reasons. The city of Detroit and the facilities that you've built here. So it's a privilege for me to be here in one of its inaugural events. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yinka.
And I'll continue with those thanks, really, and huge thanks to Cézanne and John and Kelly and all the team for inviting Tadeo and I to Detroit and this brilliant and beautiful city. We've been here since Monday, and we've had the pleasure of meeting the heirs, which have been such inspiring conversations. So I thank you for, again, sharing your time with us as well. And again, Tadeo and I are really looking forward towards a journey of continuing to find ways to cross the Atlantic, collaborate and work with you guys in some ways. So yeah, thank you so much. As Tadeo mentioned, I am the creative director of Abandoned Normal Devices. A lot of my work within the organization really focuses on working directly with artists, but also thinking about our approach to working with places. So as Tadeo mentioned as well, we are a nomadic festival. So every 2 years we situate ourselves in a new place. So I'm always really interested in what it means to introduce artists to these places, to ask them and invite them to respond to these post-industrial landscapes and to create work in response to these landscapes. But not only just the landscapes, but the people too. And I think that's where a lot of my background comes into play here. So I actually studied architecture and design, and so I come from that sort of route. But I sort of escaped the architectural office. I was much more interested in just testing things out, and we would say back in London, try a thing, as a way of like experimenting and playing with the city. So I was really interested in back in 2012, thinking about just post-economic crisis and just after graduating as well, thinking about the city centre and particularly the mall spaces, and thinking about how we could introduce a different type of exchange within these, which were then quite dormant spaces because a lot of shops are shut up and moved on or closed permanently, essentially. So I managed to somehow convince some landowners and sort of property owners of these shop units in a Birmingham City Centre mall to give me one of the units for free, essentially for an extended period of time. And I decided I was really interested in what it meant to kind of create, in some ways, like an artist-led project space within that very highly commerce space, what it meant to turn that space into both a studio space for artists and also an opportunity to connect, so a gallery space, a way of connecting with the public, of engaging with the public as well. And a lot of things that I think maybe drove me at that point was, I grew up in London, I actually studied in Birmingham, and I'd seen a lot of people study in Birmingham and want to depart the city back to London again or depart somewhere else. And I was really interested in why not create the support systems to allow people to exist within a city like Birmingham and what that meant. And for me, I think through that project, I understood the importance of network because that project not only did it give people the space in terms of studio space to showcase or to make work, but the space to also create community. And the video actually mentioned it as well. And I think that's like one of the things that I find is such a resource that's often forgotten and looked over in a way. And I think that sense of community and network goes a long way in terms of artistic practice and the process of artistic practice and cultural production as well. So yeah, I'll maybe leave it there and just say again a huge thanks. I'm really looking forward to this conversation unpacking as well over the next few minutes as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you all so much. So I feel like we already touched on a number of things, but I want to pick up on this thread of what it means to sort of ride alongside kind of artists and creative practitioners at the beginning of kind of projects and ideas. And I know, particularly I've had the pleasure of being in conversation with Kelly a lot about both the works that she's both stewarded and shepherded and sort of commissioned in the past with artists. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about what that's really like to be in on that iterative process. And then I'll sort of dive into additional questions.
Wow, yeah, well, I think every project or every conversation with an artist is different. And I would say that the very first thing I sort of enter into is just tell me what your ideas are, and let's find a way in which we can begin to sketch them together. If it's really most of the projects I've worked on, just to kind of reverse a little bit, have been from the ground up. So really at the ideation stage, it hasn't even been realized. Maybe the materials or collaborators, nothing has really been identified. And it can be, obviously a scary space, a space that needs to be resourced, financed, or even just further developed. And so for me, I realized early on in my curatorial career that was a place where I had, when I really enjoyed it, but I also felt like I could give a lot to that space. A lot of curators work with existing work, as you might know, or works that are well and developed and already out in the world. So for those of us that work on new commissions, it's a lot, right? But you have to really enjoy it, and the conversation is, like I said, always different. But to be working alongside artists, it's really being able to help them and help yourself refine not only the why, of course, always, but just what it might mean to them, and also who and how they want that encounter, what they want that encounter to be. Again, it goes back to not just the site, thinking about meta-normal devices and thinking about the site specificity, space, the context, how one might encounter it, and then that meaning for the artist is so at the core of any commission conversation. And this might feel very general, but when you're in conversation with an artist, you kind of know it begins to take shape. And then you also ask, dream big, like where and how might this be something that will allow for a risk in your practice, allow for you to explore that idea that maybe you haven't yet been able to put out into the world, and how might we be able to approach that together. And it really is sort of the building blocks are developed through that conversation, but it also is allowing and being an advocate for it throughout the process. So, often there are many folks that will say no. Most will say no along the way. It can't be financed, it can't be realized, you can't do this, you can't touch the floor, you can't touch the walls, whatever no's might come, because there's always many. You have to figure out a way to navigate the yeses, and find them for the artists. I say that all the time. You have to be sort of a curator of yes, and to articulate that for an artist is really your role. So I would say that's kind of where it begins, like listening, identifying, refining, and then advocating.
I wonder if we can also pick up again on this idea of what it means to sort of then, take that sense of trust that an artist has at the beginning of a commissioning process. And I'll open it up to both you and Yinka, Tadeo, to really talk about how you work with artists when you're commissioning, especially when you're both entering communities in the northwest of England, which share very similar characteristics, but not exact, because Detroit is an exceptional city. But, how do you really begin that dialogue, and what is the sort of sense of intentionality and trust that you both have been bringing to that process?
Yeah, well, I can speak to that, maybe kick that off, because that's been, like, I think a conversation today and I have been really wrestling with, because as a nomadic festival, we travel and we kind of pop up in these new locations, and what does it mean to introduce ourselves? So our main festival sort of happens during a particular weekend in the year, sometime in spring, and we've been really interested in creating a new, in some ways, contract with these places and how we work with them, and rather than and think more about how do we build that sense of trust in a very early stage, and how do we start to, through sort of micro interventions and extensions of ourselves into those communities in very, like I said, very micro ways. We're really interested in stimulating that conversation and dialogue with them and discourse and exchange over a very much slower period in the lead up to our festival, and thinking about, that relationship building aspect of our work. But not only just that, but also the aftercare, I think, is something that's really important to us as well, in terms of what does it look like post our festival? What's the legacy we live? What do we live in that place, in that site? And also, how do we work with local practitioners as well to so they can be part of that legacy long term in a way. So there's always that balance I think we have to strike between newness and bringing in people from internationally across the world, which we love to do and love to co-commission and program, but also that balance in really being quite sensitive in that this is this is someone's neighborhood, this is someone's place. And again, I think we're really, really conscious of that in all our work as well. Just to speak to that part.
I mean, echoing what Yinka is saying, the values of care and collaboration are very much part of AND's policies and core values, as well as risk-taking and providing a framework where artists can take risks in a development context without pressure of funding type deliverables. I guess there's also the duty of care, and questions that we ask ourselves is what is the duty of care of organizations towards the sustainability of the artists that we work with, and how, when we're talking about site specificity and asking artists to respond to a site, and in our case is really about immersiveness and the interplay between our human condition and our built environment, and how can that thrive, how can that activate community engagement, private sector. It has a package of benefits that extends beyond the artist practice, but the role of the artist is crucial in this pipeline. So how can we ensure that this labor is protected and is sustainable? There's opportunities and challenges. Challenges like, how do we ensure that we're not commodifying underserved communities and artistic practice because they become attractive spots for funders and strategic funding. So is it perhaps through collectivization that creates artist schemes where ownership is shared across artist collectives? A lot of the talks that we've had with the cohort was about, some of the talks was about using artist collectives as a tool to sustain practice and to democratize that value, and in the process to make it viable. So yeah, I think that maybe adds to what Yinka was saying.
Yeah, and I also think it really touches on some of the conversations we've been having with you, Xinran, around just this idea of like valuing creative labor and really trying to think about, what are the new kind of alternative models? How does that also have to be experimented with? but also in this context of sort of like technology. And I think it sort of picks up really well on a lot of the bodies of work that you've been concentrated on. So I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I kind of just want to talk about like the idea of collaboration. I think these days art and technology collaboration is such a buzzword concept, and we think it's everywhere, but it's actually a really, really hard thing to do. And you know, like there's still a lot of professions, including science, technology. When you bring the idea of an artist collaborating with them, they often just want the artist to illustrate their like discoveries or their data. And on the other hand, sometimes I bring an artist, an amazing artist that I love, to a boardroom where everyone there is so eager to hear their brilliant ideas. They're open, they're prepped, but the artist comes in with like the art school lingo. Just not to the right audience, right? So it's really a craft to pair people together. And from this 7-on-7 program, which has really shaped art and tech collaboration for over a decade, I've learned to, the first step is really to let individuals deepen into themselves. Like when we approach a technologist, we say we choose you as who you are, not as which company you're representing, right? It's always important to just like get to know each other as human beings. And yeah, it's a long process. In the end, we make sure they choose each other as partners, and they align fundamentally on values, on their vision for the future that they want to see, they want to bring into reality. And when I work in tech companies, it doesn't matter if you think the product could benefit from an artist's input. It's so important to just like find a friend in the product team, like find Nate, find David, who just gets it. And not so many people get it, but once you find that friend, you begin to develop a strategy that coheres both disciplines. You kind of find your co-translator to help you. And yeah, I find this really kind of a lot of situational decision making, like what you said, like the art of collaboration. I think I've learned so much from working with artists. And ultimately, artists ask questions that society want to ask.
Yeah.
And I want artists to really think about their unique position in society and their aura and just hone that. Because I've heard all of you telling me your stories, and it deeply, deeply moved me. And I think every encounter artists can have with society, with an audience, it's the moment that you can change someone's lives and just really like hone that craft and that power, that unique power that you have.
I want to pick up on that with you as we think about what it takes to sort of, do durational work, both in technology, but in relation with other people. Like you talked already about being able to witness sort of the change in the technology itself, but I think, it was also the way that society had changed, right? Yeah. And been impacted by that. And I think, that's what really fascinates me about the way that artists engage with technology, but engage with technology critically in society.
Yeah. I think a lot of artists give birth to a lot of these and some of these ideas to a point where these are so far-fetched. Yeah. Thinking about like Buckminster Fuller designing, well, one day there will be buildings with bricks that light up. Well, never mind, they don't exist yet. Yeah. But one day this is possible. So this imagination that takes place, and sometimes completely unrealistic imagination. But I think there's something really interesting that we see is, and this thing about platforms, and sometimes, and I'm seeing a lot of this trend that's taking place where artists are creating art, but then they create platforms for other artists to activate. And this is a huge shift that we're seeing. So this idea of artist as activist, artist as connector, artist as organizer. And I think all of you are doing that at some level or another, and some of you are really deep into it. I mean, Wes, I mean, you're really working as artist as possibly real estate developer, or real estate developer as artist, or or looking at Ash. I mean, your work in policy and public policy and city policy as a creative practice. I mean, this is something that we keep forgetting, is that artists sometimes, and maybe not sometimes, maybe a lot of the times, some of the most creative solutions to the problem that we face are coming from the arts. So I think this is one of those things that we need to support this, and sometimes, yeah, this may be a really far-fetched idea at the moment, and then it takes a subsequent generation or subsequent year or two, or sometimes a few months for us to go, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. And I think sometimes we need those cultural translators. And I think this is where you folks come in as curators and folks that can actually take these ideas and then have this cultural translator process that allows it to have a much broader platform. I mean, again, it goes back to this thing of artists are incredible managers. They're incredibly resourceful. Often we just don't manage enough resources. And that also is not just financial, it's also in every other aspect of our practice.
Yeah, that's great. So we are going to take questions from the audience, so be thinking about them. But as you are getting your questions ready, we have some mics, so wait for runners to come with mics, and please introduce yourself and then ask your question. But I have one kind of final question before we tee that up. You all have had an opportunity to spend time with our artist in residence. It was a real unique way of both learning about themselves and their practice, but also something about the city that they care about and the community that they care about. So could you talk a little bit in our kind of moments before we start getting kind of questions from the audience about what really struck you over the last couple of days with the artists in residence and their practice and the work in the city?
I can maybe start with the city. So I'm still recovering from my jet lag, and it's my first time in Detroit, so take this with a pinch of salt. But the cultural capital and the cultural value and potential in Detroit is undeniable. And it's been an amazing experience. And I guess an observation is that, to me, Detroit as a city has striking similarities to what the process of an artist is. So if you could think, if a city could be an artist, I would say that Detroit is one. It produces and it iterates, and then it discards, it keeps. It discards, it keeps. So I guess that's where this idea of a city of the future, or the promise of a future, comes from. While saying it discards, it keeps, it's not necessarily always desirable when it discards and it iterates, but holistically, the culture of DIY makers and just making in general and innovating is ingrained deeply into the fabric of the city. So yeah, I think that was my observation, and I really commend that, and I think it's an incredible quality that has a lot of potential, and it doesn't surprise me that we are here talking about it.
Yinka?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that's really struck me is the sense of scale and ambition in which the artists are working at, and the opportunity to work at that scale also as well, and how Detroit provides that in a way. And that for me is really exciting. We've got landowners here, we've got, building owners, and that for me is like such an, as Hasan was speaking to there as well, I think is like something really rich and innovative and exciting about being a practitioner in Detroit. And I really hope that continues. I really hope that it only scales and it becomes, whole neighborhoods and so on and so forth. So that's something, that sense of scale for me has been really, like, just to see that, I've been in real awe of how that's playing out here. So.
Yeah. Xinran?
Yeah, I kept thinking about what amazing facilities like this can do for artists. But at the end of the day, I actually think artists are giving so much to a place like this. Because artists are not just one individual, they're a network of communities. They bring in wisdom, complex questions, and fluid approach to problem solving that no matter how high tech a set of tools can be, alone will never be enough. So I love that these artists are literally being the conduit between a space like this and the impact it can have in a city like Detroit.
Yeah. Hasan?
Well, it's a little, I'm kind of cheating here because these folks are out of town. I mean, I've been here for a little bit. But I keep thinking about when I got here 30 years ago and later, and 30 years later, the change when you walk away from here and you come back. And the city's always been about community. I think it's one of the things that's, I think it's undeniable about our creative community here. But you know, there was, 30 years ago, the opportunities were different. I mean, we've always had incredible institutions here, whether they're the cultural institutions or they're the academic institutions, producing incredibly creative artists. This has always been around for, you know, you go back 100 years. The number of platforms and the number of opportunities at one time, I mean, it's incredible to see these things happen now. I think had this been around, I very likely wouldn't have left here. And I think it's really important for us to keep our homegrown creativity here in town.
That's right.
First, one of the things is because, well, it's really important on an economic basis. These are economic reinvestments in community, but these are also cultural reinvestments in community. And this is one of those things that I think this is incredibly central to our core and our identity as a city of creativity, a city of innovation, a city of reinvention, a city of invention. So I think this, you know, the sense of community, or the word, you will hear the word community spoken here way more frequently than many other cities in the country. And there's a reason for that. Yeah. And that reason is essentially this room here, the folks that are here. So thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. And Kelly?
Well, you know, I still have to spend some quality time with the artists, but I'd say, so that's to come. What I have seen is just really touching on what Yinka shared, which is the ambition and scale. Being in the process of just even the jury and reading the incredible applications, I knew then, I was like, wow, this is really, really mature, interesting, inventive work, and I just can't wait to be in community with them. So I look forward to our future conversations and really hearing more about what and how your ambitions lie within them. But just even seeing you here, you know, it makes me, I think that conversation around what the artists bring and the questions that you're bringing and the ways in which you're investigating is really palpable in this space and is vital. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have some questions. Oh, Rochelle.
Hi, I am Rochelle Riley, Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Detroit, and I served on the curatorial committee with Cézanne and a bunch of really smart people and saw this idea spawned. And, you know, we started at the bottom, now we're here. So my question to the observers and to the curators and to, you know, geniuses like Kelly, and even to the artists in the room, yeah, I said genius, what do you see in 5 years? Because look at how quickly this happened. This has actually happened. This is wonderful. This program is great. 5 years from now, what are we looking at?
I'm going to say over to Kelly to
no.
start with.
Oh gosh, you know, that's a constant question. There's so much that can happen in the next 5 years. And I think that potential and all these various pathways are still, we're really very much still plotting and exploring and planning around. But it's through these pilot programs that we're learning so much. And not pilot, these are sustained programs. But this first year, And already my first 6 months in the position, or 6+ months, have showed me just all the potential. I would say potential is such a complicated word. So the way I'll answer that is I continue to observe, and I really want to continue to just be in community and find ways for not only the space and the grandeur of the station, the 33 acres that it's sited on, all the wonderful resources, but how we can continue to really carve and distinguish a program that isn't just a program for program's sake, but it really is something that's defining and further defining, rather, the city of Detroit and the artists and the thinkers that are here. So I would say in 5 years, I hope it is a place where people say, if you want to think and you want to create and you want to be critical and be in conversation with others, that's the place to be. And anything that they're doing there is a place that is fostering support, but also is really allowing for experimentation and I would say furthering risk. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Xinran, any thoughts?
I think you all are building a different model here. And I want to see in 5 years a mature alternative model being demonstrated. I want to see young people want to be artists and know that they can make a living. I want to see artists moving here, artists staying here. I want to come back.
Come back before 5.
Come back before 5, for sure. Yinka, Tadeo?
Yeah, I mean, I've just had like, as everyone was talking, there's this idea of like just satellites spreading out into the city, really. And I think all the areas that are sitting here are really all capable of extending this work that's happening here into all the different neighborhoods as well. So that's what I'm really excited about. Like, what's the potential for this to spread across the city and for those hubs to also exist in those districts across the city as well. So yeah, those satellites in 5 years.
I think, well, on one part, it might be very much shaped by technological developments and how, like, new applications of, for example, AI, I think it will undeniably, well, inevitably, maybe change the way we work. And the potential of artists to be entrepreneurs, I think, will be furthered by some of these technologies. And but there's a lot of policy required to do that right. So maybe in 5 years, Detroit has been a leader in shaping that policy through working with artists that understand the nuances and have that sensitivity that is perhaps missed in Silicon Valley and in the other places where these technologies are being built so at such an accelerated level. This is a bit of a digression, but I think it's going to be relevant in this context, in the context of future technologies and how artists, the role of artists to shape the future for consumer and domestic technologies. And then maybe the question that I would put back is, in 5 years, how do you ensure that success doesn't become a problem? And oversubscription, and how do you ensure that artists are continue to have that support and that the spirit of the local businesses and the local communities remains? So it's maybe looking at the again, I said earlier, the problems of challenges of placemaking, gentrification, and so that's something to think about for sure. Yeah.
Hasan?
So, I find it really interesting that artists have always, all art was contemporary art at one time. We can go back hundreds of years, thousands of years. It was contemporary art. And artists are incredible at reflecting the society around them as a point in what is happening in that time period. So sometimes it's helpful to go backwards to look forwards. And right out the window, right there, shows what this exact spot looked like 5 years ago. Many of you in the room remember this. We know what this used to look like 5 years, and if we can imagine 5 years forward from that to today, we could apply that same 5 years forward, and the change that we saw, this is multiplicative effect that's taking place here. So I think that is what I see here, is this transformation from what we saw 5 years ago, from here as the base, as the starting point to where we could be.
Yeah. I think I will also go back to, you know, when we first started working in Detroit, it was in 2008. And at the time when we were wanting to have a conversation about kind of art and technology and really having to grapple with and understand that Detroit in some ways is still one of the least connected cities in the US, that when we talk about technology, that is not a neutral conversation. And so if you're really going to situate the way that artists can be both entrepreneurs, they can also be policymakers, but they can also be a really deep conscience for the city. And I feel like this residency program allows artists to sort of operate across all of those roles and all of those sort of intersections to try and bring their full self to the problem. And I would like to see much more of that going forward, not least of which I like having friends and not being alone in the city thinking about these problems. But it's also about the way that infrastructure grows. And I think that that's the kind of critically important thing that I was really excited about, that Michigan Central and Newlab had the foresight to invest in the kind of one-of-a-kind infrastructure. And that's both the physical infrastructure that we're sitting in, but it's also the soft infrastructure of the people, like the real talent in the teams between both of the groups. That inspires me every day. So you can tell I'm about to wrap up, right? You can tell this, you can feel this. I'm getting to a point because we are going to be joined by an amazing techno DJ to dance the rest of the night away and have some food and some drinks. But I do want to say a heartfelt thanks for everyone who came out, for everyone who has supported along the journey and contributed ideas, to our colleagues at Michigan Central and Newlab, to the audience that is here, but most importantly to the inaugural cohort of heirs. There will never be another first cohort. So thank you all so much. And with that, I also want to say another thanks to the Knight Foundation, without whom we couldn't be here, supporting individual artists and creative practitioners at the heart of these two amazing groups. With that, please go dance, please go eat, please go drink, please celebrate them. Say hi to them, they're amazing.
They are amazing.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
all.